Welcome, folks. It's Doodly Squatch, and I've got a big one for you. It's going to be multi-part, mini-series. I don't know. It just sounds more intense that way. Anywho, so yeah, got a rather long one, and let's just jump right into it. So here we go. So this drawing began as two pieces of sign paper from work. So you can see me fiddling with them, getting them into the right place so I can blow it up and figure out exactly what I want to do with it, and then just add to it. Been having a lot of these lately where I'll start something on one side of paper and then I'll want to keep adding to it and exaggerate and just make it big and scary, and I don't know. But anywho, this one started as a clown, as you can see on the left side, and then I just sort of mushed it, and here I go with further mushings. But yeah, that's kind of been my frame of mind lately, doing trying to do more big projects, things that take me a while to finish. I've always worked fast, and it's hard to get myself to slow down. So by throwing a big old detailed mush for me to then ink, color, all that, it provides a pretty good challenge for me. But whilst preparing for this, I've been reflecting a lot on things I was scared of as a kid, or just things that are scary, or obviously clowns don't frighten me, but like what did, and sort of the origins of those, or what I did with that versus what I'm scared of now, that sort of thing. So I figured we could delve into that and think about that. But so when I was young, I remember having fairly vivid dreams. Probably no more vivid than most kids. But I tended to remember a lot of them when I woke up, which some people struggle to do, from what I hear. But for me, a lot of my, the dreams that I remember that scared me the most usually had to do with losing my parents, getting lost, not being able to find them, being stuck in a closet where I can't get out and crying for them, and then waking up to my dad, shaking me awake because I guess I was crying in my sleep, that sort of thing. So it was rarely, not often, it was not monsters. It was more realistic things that scared me. I remember being really, really scared of the idea of getting robbed, someone breaking into the house while we're there, and us having to hide or fight or anything like that. That sort of stuff scared me plenty. So I remember always being real paranoid about if the doors were locked, if the windows were secure, that sort of thing. And I think part of the origin of that was when we lived in out in Lake LA, it was kind of a rougher neighborhood for sure. Our porch had gotten robbed. Somebody stole a bench. We had a bench that my grandpa had made for us. Just a simple wooden bench with metal arms and legs. Just something to sit on. And somebody stole it. So my grandpa made another one, and this time routed our name on it. Hopefully to deter people. And then my dad actually ended up like chaining it to the porch. So, just experiencing that at a young age, that was something that impressed upon me, I would say. Also, our neighbor was an interesting guy. I've been fairly blessed with neighbors throughout my life, but the earliest neighbor I can remember was quite a fellow. He's dead now, so I can. His name was Nick, and the kids in my neighborhood referred to him as Crazy Nick. They're like, "Oh my gosh, you live next to Crazy Nick?" And Nick was. It's hard to remember much about him. He had a big mustache, and when he was friendly. But when he was drinking, he was not friendly, and he was crazy indeed. He had these two massive dogs in his yard named Wendy and Coco, and I think that's their name. I know one was definitely Coco, but they, just these big dogs. And Coco was fairly friendly. If Coco was out, I wasn't too worried. But if the other dog was out, the big black one, that was bad. That was bad news. Even my mom knew, if that dog was out, not to let us out of the house. So I remember times where Nick, intentionally let the dogs out when there were kids like in the street being noisy and stuff like that. And, he was not unfamiliar with the police knocking on his door. I remember walking through my backyard to go through our fence in the backyard to go to school because it wasn't safe to go in the front yard because Nick was throwing bricks. So, that sort of thing. So, very, very real, grounded in reality kind of stuff that, that was scary. And thinking on it now, it's like that. Yeah, that could be a little traumatizing. Having a wild neighbor, that sort of thing. But it doesn't, it gives me something to compare my current neighbors to, and those that I've had before. In that light, my neighbors have been angels. So that's, hey, good for them. And I try not to, I don't want to impose myself on my neighbors at all. My antics remain in my home and not, not on the porch. I'm not going to scare. I don't want to scare any neighbors away, that sort of thing. I'm a fairly laid back guy. I don't want to cause no trouble. So yeah, with that in mind, the monsters and things didn't become, I don't know, a part of what I was afraid of until much later in life. As a kid, I was scared of, I don't know. I've mentioned the lamp in my mom's sewing room. I still, I haven't quite figured out a good way to tell and present that one, so I'll hold off on that. Maybe for part 2 or part 3 of this particular video. But, being a fan of Beetlejuice and Ghostbusters and, Tim Burton's Batman and, it's already kind of dark and gritty stuff, it took a bit to spook me. And one thing I recall seeing part of one of the Poltergeist movies. I don't think it was the first one. I think it was one of either the second or the third one. But there was a scene where someone got, it's like they're walking on carpet, and the carpet basically turned into like quicksand, and it was really scary. And honestly, I think it was the quicksand. The idea of quicksand scared me. And any child of the 90s, man, you had to be prepared for quicksand. I don't know. It seemed to be the talk of a lot of things, and it's funny how I've never experienced it for as much prep work as I had, learning about quicksand and seeing videos about quicksand and how to get out of quicksand and what not to do. You don't want to struggle and all this, and so that coming to life kind of in a movie form. I remember having a very vivid dream about me walking up some stairs and my feet plunging into the carpet like it was made out of mud, and it's just bunching up around my legs, and I'm going down, and there was a little girl I was watching get sucked into that, and that was spooky. It's funny going back to those movies now and watching them, and especially Poltergeist 2 and 3, just kind of how hokey they are. The practical effects still stand the test of time, and I still enjoy a lot of it. But just thinking about how much that particular scene scared me, it's kind of funny now. There was also, let me think, it was Fright Night, and I'm pretty sure it was the second Fright Night. The one that had old Chief Woodenhead in it. There's this big wooden Indian outside of a like general store, and the whole story sort of revolves around this young guy coming and robbing this couple that run the store and killing them. It's one of those, it is the first time I remember seeing someone die senselessly, like in a movie. And I was fairly young. But it's they're robbing the store. They're trying to get these jewels that the guy had bought from another Native American guy, on like he pawned it. It's giving him a loan. He's not going to sell them. He's just giving them some money, and that's basically collateral. And then the chief's like son, or some part of the tribe, this young crazy guy, very obsessed with his looks. Oh, I'm so pretty. Sitting there combing his hair while his buddies are roughing up the store, and the old couple and the wife's just shouting at him to stop. And then this guy just like turns a gun to puts it in her side and just pulls the trigger. And it wasn't like gory or crazy or anything like that. It was just bang, and she just drops like a sack of hammers. And I was horrified. I was plumb terrified, because when getting older and having seen actual death, it's very much like that. The lights go out, boom, you're down, and it's not not some big production, nothing like that. There's nothing glamorous about it, and it's just pow, gone. And as a kid, I remember that just blew my freaking mind. I was just it was too much for me. And I remember the show goes on. The big wooden Indian comes to life, scalps the guy, takes back the jewels, tra la la, and it's it's based off a Stephen King story. And I've since read it, and it holds up. It's still pretty wild, still pretty scary. But that should do it for now. Stay tuned for part 2, and we'll continue this discussion of fear and childhood and all that great stuff. Appreciate you guys watching. So like, comment, subscribe if you're new here and haven't done so yet. And we'll see you on the next one.